But I think the Bitcoin and Iran story is the real adoption story. El Salvador is interesting, but it's still got the IMF, layers that exist. It's still dollarized. So it's still fed IMF, and there's a previous infrastructure that creates an interesting, it's so interesting. But I think that a big part of the story was Iran's ability to use a civilian nuclear energy program to mine Bitcoin. And when you look at all the different rails, it's very interesting that they were, from the public bits that we can see, they were using stable coins and Tether on Tron, which we know has freeze functions.
Bitcoin was never just an asset. It may already be becoming a sovereign weapon. Simon Dixon is the CEO and co-founder of BNK-to-the-Future.com, the online investment platform for investing in the future of finance, an alternative finance investor and author of the book, Bank to the Future. Simon Dixon reveals that the Bitcoin and Iran story stands out as one of the clearest real-world tests of sovereign crypto adoption. He contrasts El Salvador's early Bitcoin experiment with Iran's situation, noting that while El Salvador has shown strong commitment to Bitcoin, it still operates within a dollarized economy and remains tied to institutions like the IMF. In his view, this limits how far it can challenge the existing global financial system. Iran, however, presents a different case entirely due to its severe sanctions and isolation from the US-led financial order, which makes Bitcoin's permissionless and censorship-resistant nature far more relevant. Simon Dixon reveals that Iran may already be operating as a significant, though largely hidden, Bitcoin mining power. He points to unusual timing between geopolitical events, nuclear facility activity, and a temporary drop in Bitcoin hash rate as evidence of possible energy-linked mining disruptions, potentially involving nuclear-powered infrastructure. While some of these movements could be explained by external factors, he suggests the overlap is too notable to ignore. He also highlights how sovereign energy resources could enable countries like Iran to mine Bitcoin independently, bypassing traditional financial channels. Simon Dixon reveals that this emerging model of sovereign mining and blockchain-based financial services, including Bitcoin-settled insurance concepts, could eventually challenge systems like SWIFT and even traditional insurers, such as Lloyd's of London. In this framing, Bitcoin becomes more than an asset. It becomes a parallel financial infrastructure enabling states to operate outside conventional custodial systems. Like, subscribe, and share to stay updated, because stories like this are shaping the future of global finance.
Yeah, so during the 12-day war, prior to the B-2 bomber, Operation Midnight Hammer, there was clearly an understanding that there was going to be a bombing, I think that was very theatrical. But there was clearly an understanding that one of the nuclear, plants is going to be bombed. And there was lots of movements of things that seemed to be happening from like satellite imagery. And at the exact moment that they were moving their highly enriched uranium and preparing for that, there was a massive drop in Bitcoin hash rate that suddenly came. Now, to be fair, it did coincide with some weather outage in Texas as well, which could explain it. But the two happened at the exact same time. There was a really big drop in Bitcoin hash rate. And then the bombing happened, and then the hash rate came back online like shortly after. And so one speculation was that they were using nuclear power plants in order to mine Bitcoin, which we do have an example of that in US. There's that TerraWolf. It doesn't scale, but they've managed to get like 2 cents energy cost to be one of the most efficient Bitcoin miners in the world, but they only managed to get like a couple of thousand ASICs, from my understanding, into that. And now we've got AI competing. It's not like Iran didn't know that, you know what I mean? It's like, it's not something we know that they wouldn't have known. And then at the same time, when all those confiscations was happening with Iran's Tether, and Tether had to pull the freeze function, we got that whole hacks and DeFi stuff. All seems very coincidental that these things happened at the same time. But the Bitcoin, they couldn't touch. And so it genuinely shows that a real threat to the FIC is the ability for a sovereign country to have its own nuclear energy program and mine Bitcoin. And then when we got this story that they will accept, they're doing a bespoke insurance service and the only way to pay is in Bitcoin. I'm not sure to the extent of what that's like, but they did release a website. And the whole thing was that they were saying that they're going to become, well, it was an attack not just on SWIFT, but it was also an attack on Lloyd's of London, because they were looking at, it's not quite insurance, but you can imagine how an insurance model could happen here with all on-chain transactions and pooled together into a multi-signature wallet. You can imagine how that can work in the future. But they said the insurance contract will be delivered by cryptographic proof within the Bitcoin blockchain. And it will be held in some kind of multi-signature setup. And then upon delivery, the funds are transferred. So whether they're using the full extent of what Bitcoin can do in order to develop a new parallel Bitcoin insurance market that circumvents both SWIFT and Lloyd's of London, I think it signals to us that Iran is going to be most likely that sovereign country that utilizes Bitcoin to the fullest extent with no custodians, the way that Bitcoin was actually designed. And so I was really interested in watching that progress. And I think there's been a lot of progress that hasn't made the headlines for obvious reasons.
Behind every shipment crossing hostile borders, a hidden financial system may already be replacing traditional insurance and SWIFT. The speaker reveals that modern global trade and shipping increasingly depends on complex layers of political assurance and financial intermediaries, such as Lloyd's of London, where insurance coverage is often tied to geopolitical guarantees from powerful states. According to the discussion, even moving a single shipment through high-risk regions requires coordinated assurances that neither side, such as U.S.-aligned forces or groups like the IRGC, will interfere, and in practice only limited actors like China can currently bridge that gap through informal brokerage arrangements. In this environment, Bitcoin is presented as a potential neutral settlement layer that could bypass traditional financial choke points and sanction-heavy systems. The speaker suggests that some actors may already be experimenting with Bitcoin-based payment rails to solve these logistics and insurance challenges, even if wallet addresses remain undisclosed. Concepts like CoinJoin and privacy-preserving transaction structures are highlighted as tools that could resist sanction tracking, raising the possibility of sovereign or open-source, mixing systems that cannot be easily targeted by regulators. This leads to speculation that nation-states could eventually develop their own decentralized financial infrastructure. Ultimately, the speaker connects this to a broader geopolitical shift where sanctioned nations like Iran and Russia, alongside emerging BRICS-aligned strategies, explore Bitcoin and alternative monetary systems as a response to SWIFT restrictions, CBDCs, stablecoins, and the declining efficiency of traditional physical trade and settlement networks. Let's get back to interview.
But the reality is that, right now you need Lloyd's of London insurance. You need America to provide Lloyd's of London with assurance they're not going to attack a shipment. And you need to do the same on the IRGC side. That's how you get a shipment through right now. The only country willing to do that is China or someone that's got a guarantee directly with the IRGC and some kind of brokerage relationship. And they use Bitcoin in order to try and solve that problem. So they haven't published any wallet addresses. But also I think it's interesting that they could publish those wallet addresses. But then we've got the whole CoinJoin story, right? That if they wanted to sanction those wallet addresses, they'd have to use a CoinJoin and perfectly legally mix up those transactions. And I do remember way back in 2013 when China national media allowed Bitcoin documentaries to air on their TV, which has to have approval at the government level. Because I believe they saw it as an attack on a geopolitical attack in 2013 as well, on the dollar. And so I remember those days. But yeah, it's very important for the Americans to keep an eye on what's happening with all this Clarity Act, Genius Act, and all that stuff. Because under the Biden administration, there was definitely the coordinated attack and Operation Choke Point 2.0. FTX was on the board, was Sullivan and Cromwell, which is the CIA's law firm that was set up for them. We got all these very, more and more of that's coming out as well. The Signature Bank team are now speaking. They built the FTX rails that allowed them to do all the crime using the blockchain settlement rails using Signature Bank and integrated with Silvergate. Just so happens all the banks that got taken out in Silicon Valley Bank. So they built all that alternative rails, and there was deep, I think, connections at both Celsius and FTX with deep state operations. When we transitioned to the Trump administration, he said we want to make Bitcoin capital or crypto capital, I think he always said. He did all the pardoning. Now, the big pardons were connected with corruption, so at the Binance CZ UAE level. And then you had the Justin Sun, World Liberty Financial, Steve Witkoff, all of that rabbit hole. But the other pardons were genuinely, I think, to, try and, from the crypto lobby. To try and win favor with the crypto lobby that emerged at the Bitcoin conference. So there's definitely a silent network that's being built in the background around this. And so you've got the two most sanctioned countries in the world, Iran and Russia, that seem to have a Bitcoin strategy. I think that BRICS figured out that having a single currency on a federated network was a psyop like the euro. All the central banks are accumulating gold. We're getting the stablecoin standards being built out in America. We're getting the CBDC network being built out in UAE, China, Thailand, Saudi Arabia, Hong Kong. And then we got the digital euro that's going to be part of the European surveillance state. So all of that breaks SWIFT. It creates programmable, freezable money that allows for sanction. You got the clunkiness of these gold, oil, like physical shipment with the demonstration of the Strait of Hormuz and the limitations of ship. In the end, you're only left with one thing, which is Bitcoin and self-custody. And so moving into a multipolar world and one world government control grid, which is where I think we're going, those two tracks. I think Bitcoin helps in the multipolar settlement layers, digital rails, coin joins, and to defang Western banking power, legacy power interests.
Ultimately, the discussion points toward a shifting global financial architecture where Bitcoin is no longer viewed only as a speculative asset, but as a potential settlement layer for geopolitically constrained trade. In a world where sanctions, insurance guarantees, and shipping permissions are tightly controlled by legacy institutions, permissionless digital money introduces an alternative path for value transfer that is not easily frozen or redirected by central authorities. This creates the possibility of parallel financial rails where sovereign actors, particularly those operating under heavy restrictions, experiment with energy-backed Bitcoin mining and blockchain-based settlement systems to maintain economic continuity. As traditional mechanisms like SWIFT, correspondent banking, and maritime insurance face increasing friction from geopolitical fragmentation, the appeal of decentralized coordination grows stronger. Whether through privacy-preserving transaction methods or sovereign mining strategies, the broader trend suggests a gradual movement toward fragmented yet interconnected financial systems, where Bitcoin plays a foundational role in enabling cross-border economic activity outside conventional custodial control. Stay tuned, subscribe, and share, because what's happening behind the scenes in global finance is bigger than most people realize. Is Bitcoin becoming the secret weapon of sanctioned countries like Iran? Thanks for watching.